The Senator of Connecticut.
Quorum call. I ask that the quorum call be lifted. Thank you. Madam President, 2 weeks ago, House Republicans failed to advance the Take Care of American Veterans Act. That failure in the House was the latest example of broad bipartisan opposition to the Republican proposal to cut more than $50 billion. That's $50 billion in benefits for disabled veterans over the next 10 years. This controversial proposal continues to divide Congress, and it also is dividing the veteran community. And it's something we could have easily averted if my Republican friends had engaged in a serious and substantive conversation about the process, a conversation not only with Democrats, but with the Veteran Service Organization. They've pursued a take-it-or-leave-it approach. I'd like to think that it is mainly the House of Representatives that's responsible for this take-it-or-leave-it approach, because Democrats and veterans advocates have been very clear from the very beginning. We oppose the cuts in the Take Care of America Veterans Act for more than 1 million veterans who are currently eligible to receive benefits because they suffer from sleep apnea or tinnitus. These disabilities are not hypothetical or abstract. They are real. And they do disable people, and often they are the result directly from combat or training that inflicts the same kind of harms. For example, standing near artillery being fired for many hours a day. The result is impairments of hearing, tinnitus, and the toxic chemicals in training as well as in combat can result in sleep apnea. So I'm here to say again, I oppose efforts to water down the Major Richard Starr Act, a DoD-administered and funded policy with cuts to veterans' benefits. I oppose watering it down by taking care and benefits away from veterans. The Take Care of America Act, to its credit, includes dozens of bipartisan priorities that Democrats have authored and championed. They're bipartisan, many of them. I support them. I want these priorities signed into law. Veterans, survivors, and caregivers deserve them. But we cannot accept the false narrative that accepting the Republican proposed cuts is the only way to do it, our way or the highway, especially since it is a budgetary rule that has been selectively enforced in the past, that somehow there needs to be an offset. In fact, there should not be an offset to care for veterans by taking away from other veterans for a program that is an obligation of the Department of Defense, call it the Department of War. It is still their obligation to provide full retirement pay without subtraction for disability benefits, as is now required, unjustly, unconscionably. Republicans insist on offsetting new investments in veterans with those offsets, which is absurd. And I hope still my Republican colleagues will look to the compromise that I have offered. I don't think there should be a need for an offset. There hasn't been for some benefits in the past. But if Republicans are going to continue to block the Major Richard Starr Act with insistence on an offset or a pay-for, I have one. It is, in fact, contained in an alternative bill that I am offering today to address the two major concerns with the Take Care of America's Veterans Act. First, it would replace the watered-down version of the Major Richard Starr Act with my bill to fully eliminate the wounded veterans tax. And it would strike the unprecedented cuts for disabled veterans who suffer from service-connected tinnitus and sleep apnea. In doing so, it would utilize unspent Department of Defense funds from H.R. 1, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, to cover the entire cost of the bill. It's the only offset proposal for the Take Care of Veterans Act that has garnered bipartisan support, and it is the one that doesn't pit some veterans against other veterans. More than $75 billion of the Department of Defense funds in H.R. 1, a bill signed into law more than 1 year ago, still remain unspent and unobligated. And CBO has confirmed, absolutely confirmed, enactment of my proposal prior to the department's obligation of those funds would provide the savings we need. The CBO has said if we pass this bill, the savings from unobligated funds can be counted as an offset. Let me just say bluntly, there's a lot of rhetorical rigmarole that we can apply to pay-go and offsets and pay-fors. We make the laws here. We can pay for this program out of unobligated funds that the Secretary of Defense, call him the Secretary of War, has said is unobligated. Now, he said a lot of it will be obligated, but it's for things like the Golden Dome, where most military experts say that money will not be feasibly spent by the end of the year. We should use it if we need to have an offset. I believe that veterans, survivors, and caregivers have paid for their benefits through service and sacrifice. The cost of caring for veterans is part of the cost of war. And for those combat injured veterans who are receiving disability benefits for their injuries, they should not have to sacrifice their retirement pay that is an obligation of the Department of Defense. It should not be taken out of the VA. It may seem like an abstract principle, but to veterans who would lose sleep apnea and tinnitus benefits, it's a big deal. In fact, it can be a life-changing deal. Costs that are dramatically increasing each day because of the president's blundering war of choice in Iran have resulted in 18 service members dying and more than 600 injured. And they will be among the ones who are penalized if they retire with fewer than 20 years. We are creating a new generation of combat injured veterans. It is unconscionable to claim that we can only care for them by forcing other veterans to sacrifice. We need to do the right thing. Veterans deserve meaningful results from a grateful nation, and they should never be handed an invoice when the costs of war come due. My Republican colleagues cannot claim that the Major Richard Starr Act is unaffordable. If you want a chart to give you some idea of the comparatively minuscule costs of the Major Richard Starr Act, here's $13 billion. It's over 10 years. Here's our FY27 defense request, For 1 year, it dwarfs. In fact, 13 billion is hardly a rounding error on 1.5 trillion. The NDAA benefits expansion in FY20 and FY21 was 13 billion, no pay for. The estimated costs of the Iran war, 38 billion, that figure is a low ball. It's in excess, really, of 100 billion. We all know it. Compared to all we spend on our defense capability, doing right by these veterans is basically a rounding error that the country can well afford. Now, my colleague's bill also siphons off $500 million from disabled veterans for an IT slush fund that the VA does not need or request. The money that they are taking from veterans who suffer from sleep apnea or tinnitus cover, in their view, the Major Richard Starr Act, but it's only 17% of the money that they're taking away from these disabled veterans. The rest of it, of the $56.2 billion that they would save by, in effect, inflicting harm on these veterans, who knows? Taking money from veterans with service-connected disabilities and giving it to President Trump's cronies or whoever else is going to lay claim to that compensation cut but not used is absolutely shameful, staggering dereliction of our obligation to veterans. Cutting $56 billion worth of benefits when only 15%, 17% will go toward covering new VA benefits is cruel and unconscionable. Better to adopt my compromise proposal, taking unobligated funds, $13 billion, out of the more than $75 billion that are unspent and unobligated, that the CBO can be used for these savings, is a better way to go. It's the only one that has garnered bipartisan support. It's the only one that isn't opposed by the stakeholders. It's the only one that can pass. It's the only one that should pass. And so, notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 433 S4744. I ask unanimous consent that the Blumenthal substitute amendment at the desk be agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The gentleman from Kansas.
Madam President, thank you. It saddens me that we are here because I wish we were here with a vote on the Senate floor to pass the Major Richard Starr Act and other pieces of legislation that are so important to veterans, their families, and their caregivers across the country. The senator from Connecticut outlined all the things that he says his amendment to this legislation would do and be supported by. But the reality is the senator from Connecticut has tried time and time again to pass legislation similar to that, never to succeed. And earlier this year, I was on the Senate floor at my seat here, standing here, telling folks that maybe for once we'll quit sponsoring pieces of legislation that benefit veterans, but never get to the point in which they're actually passed. And I committed myself to finding a way in which passage of the legislation could occur. Not just remarks on the Senate floor or in committee or in gatherings of veterans or speaking to our constituents at home of our support. In most instances, this would be for the Richard Starr Act, which has nearly every member of the Senate as a co-sponsor, many members of the House of Representatives as a co-sponsor, but that's been the case for 6 years. I was looking for a path that would result in a result. And at the heart of the debate today are those tens of millions of service members, veterans and caregivers, survivors and family members, and VA employees who would benefit by the legislation that I have introduced, the legislation that the senator from Connecticut is offering to accept with some amendments. These men and women have been waiting years for the life-saving benefits that this bill would provide. What we will decide today will determine whether they can access the mental health treatments they desperately need, whether they can put food on the table, pay their bills on time, if they're able to remarry after the loss of their service member or veteran spouse without sacrificing benefits they need to support their families, and much more. The point of that sentence or few sentences is this is a comprehensive piece of legislation that begins with the Richard Starr Act, the one that I said was sponsored by most members of Congress, but never sees the outcome that those veterans and military retirees deserve. The stakes in this debate are high. I think the legislation that we are talking about, perhaps debating about, is one of the most consequential pieces of legislation that will affect veterans, their family members, caregivers, and others, certainly in my time as chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and perhaps my time in the United States Senate. I've been a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee in 14 years in the House and now 15 years in the Senate. I've devoted effort, time, and attention to making sure we do right by those who serve our country. I appreciate my colleague, Senator Blumenthal, in fact, our shared determination, our dedication to the Richard Starr Act. But he's tried, as I understand by his words, 8 times, offering a unanimous consent, and each time that effort has been successful. Occasionally I get complimented for efforts. I appreciate compliments at any stage of what we're doing here. But what we really ought to be interested in is getting results. And not results for a compliment, but results because it makes such a difference in so many veterans' lives. Today, the senator from Connecticut, it's another example of his attempt to pass legislation, usually without an offset, but today using an alternative offset. I respect his goal, but once again, as of July the 22nd, the Congressional Budget Office has again confirmed to the committee that the offset, the use of rescission of unobligated funds to the Department of Defense in H.R. 1 does not offset mandatory spending and therefore does not qualify under the requirements of law to the Senate. The requirements of the law as the Senate does its work, but as the House and Congress are obligated to abide by. This plan does not meet the needs of the moment, and it will result in the failure by Congress once again to deliver to our America's heroes. There's a simple choice before us. We can either keep repeating failed efforts that result in no progress delivering for veterans and military families, or we can step up and provide leadership needed to finally get them the help they need and deserve. Action, not results. We want action that has results. This is why, shortly after this conversation, this discussion between the senator from Connecticut and I will be asking for a unanimous consent agreement myself to pass the legislation with an offset that the Congressional Budget Office has determined to be a viable offset. The Take Care of America's Veterans Act would expand benefits and health care to millions of veterans and their families, caregivers and survivors across our nation. It combines 60. I think our committee, the Committee on Veterans Affairs, deservedly has the reputation of working in a bipartisan way to get results. And we combined, in our efforts to get the Richard Starr Act, other pieces of legislation that are hugely important to the veteran community. 60 pieces of bipartisan legislation chosen in this process of putting this package together for their sponsorship and support by Democrats and Republicans. This is not a partisan effort. This is a desire, an effort to accomplish something that would benefit all of us who have made efforts to support our veterans and to make certain that we do it in a way that gets 60 votes in the United States Senate. That includes the Major Richard Starr Act, which the senator from Connecticut has been a longtime advocate. That's to address a long-standing injustice, something that is totally wrong, by allowing medically retired combat veterans, disabled veterans, they are not allowed to receive both benefits. This would allow medically retired combat disabled veterans to receive both disability compensation from the VA and their earned retirement pay from the DOD. The senator from Connecticut talks about our committee and the committee that he serves on as well, the Armed Services Committee. The Armed Services Committee has jurisdiction, but it's so many veterans that have a consequence from the current law that I decided it was time for us to step forward and find a path forward. This legislation, in addition to the underlying Richard Starr Act, includes Love Lives On Act. That allows surviving spouses of fallen service members and veterans to remarry without losing their benefits that they need to support their families. It includes the Veteran Access Act to make it easier for veterans to get life-saving treatment and particularly mental health capabilities, high-quality care in the VA medical facilities and in the community as well. Those of us, Madam President, from rural places understand the value of that community care, and in today's time of challenges with our veterans' mental health and suicide prevention efforts, that community care becomes even more important. Quick access is critical. It also includes the Sherry Briley and Eric Edmondson Veteran Benefit Expansion Act to increase compensation benefits for veterans with severe service-connected disabilities and their families. There are dozens of other bills, bipartisan bills, sponsored, led by Republicans and led by Democratic members of the Senate. They're included in the Take Care of America's Veteran Act to make certain the VA is equipped with the right resources, staff, and facilities, and the authorities to provide the support that service members, veterans, and family needs. Now, the question that we generally are arguing about is the pay for. Again, the law requires that. To pay for these improvements, this bill would codify elements of a rule that the VA proposed 4 years ago in the Biden administration in 2022. And the VA indicated then and now it plans to change how the department evaluates claims for service-connected disability ratings for sleep apnea and tinnitus. VA officials testified before the House Committee on Veterans Affairs in January that the department is moving forward, and VA officials confirmed that again just several weeks ago. The reason this is important is that that means there are going to be changes that the VA is authorized to make in these two arenas in providing benefits to veterans. The VA in the Biden administration and apparently agreed to in the Trump administration found that there were ways to improve, and they're required by law to evaluate the benefits they provide veterans, and if changes are appropriate because of medicine or science or changes in treatment, the VA can modify those benefits to reflect current science and medicine. The VA is going to do that. The offset is the fact that when the VA does that, it saves money. When the VA does that, however, it will be considered paying down the debt. I don't know how it can be a radical idea or an unfair idea that if we're going to take the money out of the VA for those two circumstances, the VA is going to do that, why don't we capture a significant portion of that and actually use that money to provide benefits to veterans? So it's not like we're taking something away. The VA is going to alter the formula in their normal course of business, and we're capturing the savings in part. We're capturing part of the savings to actually use it to help other veterans, their families, their caregivers. Once the department finalizes the rule, the savings associated from that change in the rule will be lost. It will no longer serve as an offset for anything. It will just be into the general treasury. It will be a lost opportunity for us to reinvest those funds in the long overdue improvements included in the Take Care of Americans Veterans Act. My colleague has stated the costs of war include caring for our veterans. I share that sentiment. Military service is a family service. The cost of war also includes caring for spouses and children and caregivers and survivors. The Take Care of America's Veterans Act would do that and more. So we had the opportunity to use something that's going to happen. We have the opportunity to use it to make sure it's used to benefit veterans. And the idea that we're taking a benefit away from someone is also false. This is prospective. After the rule changes, that's when we have the opportunity to make certain that we're still caring for our veterans. We're not taking anything away from any veteran that receives benefits today. And in fact, there's a grace period in which veterans can continue to apply for these benefits if after this legislation becomes law. We're not taking anything away. We're using money that the VA says is no longer going to be spent, and spend that money in a different way for veterans, often including the same veterans that receive those disability payments. This legislation is strongly supported by many military and veterans organizations, including the Wounded Warrior Project, the Military Officers Association of America, the Vietnam Veterans of America, the AMVETS, the Tragedy Assistance Program, TAPS for survivors, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, the Veterans Justice Alliance, the National Defense Committee, the Military Coalition and Mission Roll Call. It is also supported by the American Legion, the largest veteran organization in the country, and by Medal of Honor recipients Brett Slobinski and Earl Plumley, the President and Vice President of the Medal Honor Society. It's also supported by Richard Starr's brother, who has been an advocate for the Richard Starr legislation since the beginning of this issue's arrival, and certainly since the passage of his brother and his interest in making sure that his brother is honored. These organizations know the challenges facing the military and veteran community today. They know firsthand the high cost of continued inaction by Congress, the cycle of delaying veterans, caregivers, survivors from receiving earned benefits. It's not a perfect analogy, but I remember my own mother lobbying me because she was a notch baby in the Social Security system. And if you were born in a certain set of years, your benefits were less than the people before you and the people after you. My mom accused me of Congress, maybe she wasn't accusing me personally, but accused Congress of just waiting till she died before making the change. I want to make sure that we do not lose another veteran, another service member. I want to make sure we get a result, and we get a result fast. When I introduced this legislation, my assumption was that we could accomplish this even in the Senate and the House, in this difficult world we work in, that this legislation could be passed by Congress and signed by the President. This legislation is supported by the White House. We could get this legislation done in the miracle of a month. I didn't anticipate the opposition that has arisen. I've indicated to the senator, the ranking member of the Committee on Veterans Affairs, an interest in working together to resolve differences, and we will work to do that. But doing what we've done, what has been done time and time again, of a UC request that has no result, is not unsatisfactory to me and unsatisfactory to the veterans and the veteran organizations I just listed. Tired of waiting. Don't wait until our veterans are no longer living before you do something to protect their benefits and resolve an injustice that has gone on far too long. The cycle of delaying veterans, caregivers, survivors from receiving their earned benefits must end, and must end now. And with that, Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I am frankly astonished and appalled by the argument just made by my friend and colleague from Kansas, the chairman of the VA committee. His argument essentially is the VA is going to take away these benefits through rulemaking, and therefore we should take advantage of the savings that the VA is going to make by action that is wrong, unconscionable, and deeply hurtful to veterans. Now, let's be very blunt here. The Biden administration was considering a similar proposal. I fought it. We fought it successfully. The Biden administration backed down because they knew it was wrong. I predict that there will be the similar kind of outrage in the veterans community to taking away these disability benefits from well-deserving veterans, and that the present Secretary of the VA will be forced to back down as well. Why are we doing his handiwork when he has not even yet proposed the rule? We are assuming he will do something that is wrong, shameful, and unconscionable, and we should take advantage of it. Count me out. I fought the Biden administration on this one. I will fight any rule that will inflict this harm on veterans. And even if he were to do it, why should we codify it, put it into statute, so that it can't be reversed at some later point without another statute? I am hopeful that we can reconsider this idea of depriving disabled veterans of benefits in order to help other veterans. Now, I want to be very clear. This is my 8th or 9th time here asking for unanimous consent, but it is an entirely new proposal that I am offering. In fact, it is the same proposal that the senator from Kansas is offering, except it doesn't take away benefits from veterans. It pays for the measure in another way. Senator from Kansas says it would be against the law for us to do it. Who makes laws here? The Senate and the Congress make the laws. If we made a law about how to pay for something, we can make an exception to that law. We are not bound inextricably and inevitably by other Congresses if we face an injustice under laws that other Congresses have passed. I am unwilling to accept the idea that we have to deprive benefits, gouge them, in effect, of benefits they have earned. And let me just conclude by saying all of the good things in this bill, count me in. But taking away benefits from veterans to pay for them, count me out. I think we can do better as a nation. I yield back.
Mr. President, I've described the Take Care of America's Veteran Act in my remarks following the unanimous consent request by the senator from Connecticut. But again, I would highlight that these are changes that are going to be made under normal statutory law by rules at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the end result is that the money, when saved, will be the reductions and the savings that occur will accrue to the general treasury as compared to the benefits that we want to provide to the veterans in this country. Notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to immediate consideration of calendar number 433 S4744. I ask unanimous consent that the Moran substitute amendment at the desk be agreed to, the bill as amended be considered, read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
I recognize the senator from Connecticut.
Thank you. For all the reasons that I have stated, this bill has all the right measures that I can support, except taking away benefits in the expectation that the VA secretary is going to promulgate a rule that has been beaten back in a prior administration that we should be united in opposing. Let me ask my colleague, the chairman of the VA committee, will you support the VA secretary in proposing this rule that would, in effect, cut benefits for disabled veterans?
The senator is reminded to direct his questions to the chair.
I propose that question to my colleague through the chair.
You can answer or you cannot answer.
Mr. President, I look forward to continuing to work to make sure that the veterans receive the benefits they are entitled to, and to make certain that the VA does its job in a medical and science-based manner, and would await for the VA to accomplish that, which they indicated as recently as 2 weeks ago they were going to do.
Recognize the senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I'm going to be really charitable, because I know my colleague's heart is in the right place. And I know we share an objective here, which is to care for our veterans. And I'm going to interpret that answer as his being willing to join, if it comes to pass, that we have this proposed rule, that he would oppose it. I think the VSOs would oppose it. I think the veterans community would oppose it. I think the people of America would oppose it, which is why it was withdrawn under the Biden administration, because it is such a shameful, bad idea. And we should not incorporate it in a veterans bill, the Taking Care of America, Taking Care of Veterans Act, as a means to pay for benefits to other veterans when there is no need for a pay for. All of the good things in the Take Care of Veterans Act, I support. We have a path. We have a path. Use the money from H.R. 1, unspent, unobligated, unfeasible to spend before the end of the fiscal year. It will go back into the Treasury. I think the path is clear. I hope we can come together and support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there an objection to the underlying request?
And I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Recognize the senator from Kansas.
Mr. President, thank you. The rulemaking process that was initiated in the Biden administration in 2022 has continued on the VA's list of work and has never been withdrawn, and continues to be considered, and as I indicated now for the third time, indicated by the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, the department, that it will be implemented. I just know that repeating the same political talking points without a realistic alternative has prevented these bills, and particularly the Richard Starr Act, from passing for years. It's been too easy for us to put our name on the legislation and never see it accomplished. We can tell our veterans we are supporting them, we're working for them. I want a path forward that actually demonstrates that we are able to accomplish the elimination of this injustice and the support for veterans who desperately need our attention. Our veterans should not have to, they know the cost of war, they should not have to wait for us any longer. And again, the offer that the senator from Connecticut indicated, it's the same kind of UC request with something that doesn't result in a result because it's not an offset that satisfies the law. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President,
Recognize the senator from Kansas.
Mr. President, I have 5 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President,
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, Americans are aware that many of the products we buy and sell in this country are manufactured in China. But fewer may know that most of the Chinese goods come across the ocean and into our ports on Chinese ships, whether they're flying the Chinese flag, whether they're owned or operated by Chinese companies, or even built in Chinese shipyards. But what may come as a shock is that those same ships could also carry deadly weapons. That's right, Mr. President. Hidden among the shipping containers carrying appliances, clothing, and household goods might well be missile launchers and drone launching systems. Arriving undetected, they could target our cities, destroy our infrastructure, and kill our citizens. This is a possibility American leaders must prepare for now. Naval analysts confirm that China is retrofitting cargo ships with deadly weapons. Long-range strike and surface-to-air missiles, drone launching systems, and radar and tracking systems. A large percentage of these vessels coming in and out of our ports are owned and operated by firms with direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party. What if one of these ships arrived in one of America's largest ports? Now, the best case scenario is our intelligence community would detect the weapons, enabling the Coast Guard to intercept and seize the Chinese ship. That's the best case scenario. But there's a far more alarming possibility, Mr. President. An armed Chinese cargo carrier slips in undetected, and it launches devastating attacks on the port, destroying vital infrastructure and killing hundreds and possibly many, many more. The Port of Houston is, for example, one of the largest by tonnage in our country. It's home to the world's largest petrochemical complexes and a quarter of America's oil refining capacity. The explosions caused by a Chinese attack on the port would send clouds of carcinogens into the air and over nearby communities. Meanwhile, America's energy supply would be devastated, causing painful shortages and draining the economy of millions of dollars a day. A similar disaster could play out at any of our other major ports. Los Angeles, for example, our hub for trans-Pacific trade, or Hampton Roads, Virginia, the East Coast's deepest harbor and home to the world's largest naval base. Now, neither of these situations are inevitable. If we cut our reliance on Chinese vessels and we decide to make American ships again. You see, the United States was once home to the world's largest commercial fleet, numbering 4,000 ships. Today, we manufacture only a handful of commercial vessels each year. China can build over 1,000. In total, the United States has fewer than 100 ocean-going commercial vessels, while China, they have nearly 6,000, the largest fleet in the world. Letting our maritime industrial base continue to rust is a great risk. It doesn't just give China control over global supply chains and levers to constrain America's policy options. It presents the Chinese Communist Party opportunities every day to sneak weapons into our cities. We have a choice, Mr. President. We can do nothing and invite a potential economic and national security disaster. Or we can rebuild our fleet. We can end our dependence on Chinese ships, and we can open up a new era of American shipbuilding. I choose the latter. I choose restoring American maritime dominance. The Ships for America Act is the best way to accomplish this. The bill would encourage the construction of new ships in shipyards through tax incentives. It will deliver deregulation and permitting reform to reduce costs and speed the delivery of new vessels. It also will modernize training programs at our maritime academies and recruit a new generation of mariners. And the Ships Act will establish a maritime security trust fund to finance these programs, plus an expansion of the U.S.-flagged international fleet to 250 ships by the mid-2030s. Now, we have a strong champion in President Trump, whose maritime action plan is consistent with this bill. China's retrofitting its commercial ships into covert warships. The evidence is clear. So too is the risk of allowing these vessels to dominate global trade and fill our ports because we have no ships of our own. But we have a plan to protect our ports and people, to build and launch a new fleet manned by American mariners, flying the stars and stripes. And Congress should pass the Ships Act without delay. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor. And I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Is also closed.
Mr. President,
Senator from Nebraska.
I'd like to vitiate the quorum call.
We are in quorum, and without objection, the quorum call will be vitiated.
Thank you, Mr. President. Integrity. Integrity inspires confidence. We have a problem here in the Senate and in the House. 80% of Americans believe we do a poor job of keeping our financial interests separate from the insider information that we have. People don't have the confidence in us. And that leads to an approval rating of 15% for Congress. But we can help restore integrity and therefore confidence. Confidence in the Senate, confidence in the House, confidence in our institutions. We can do that with a bill that I have introduced called the Stop Insider Trading Act. Now, it is well known that members of this body and the House have bought individual stocks. In fact, we have seen that people will post on social media the stock trades of the former Speaker of the House and trade off of her trades. In fact, as crazy as it sounds, that's become a legitimate investment strategy because it makes money. And that undermines the confidence people have in our institutions. We have disclosure laws, which is how people can see those trades and make them. But it's not enough for the integrity of the institution. We need to make the rules stronger. We need to stop people from being able to buy individual stocks in the Senate and in the House. We need my Stop Insider Trading Act because that's exactly what it does. It says that if you get elected to the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate, that you can no longer buy stock. Trading on insider information will become impossible because you won't be able to make that purchase. Now, we also want to make sure that if, say, you come from a successful business, we don't want to penalize you. We're not going to force you to sell your stock before you come here, but we are going to say that you have to give notice, 7 days at least, to let people know if you are going to sell any of the positions you own. Remember, you can't buy anymore, but if you have some already and you want to sell them, you got to give people 7 days notice. And that will address the issue, for example, of when we had a member of the Intelligence Committee sell about $1.5 million worth of stock right before the COVID pandemic sell-off in the stock market. Even the perception of impropriety undermines the integrity and therefore the confidence people have. So let's stop it altogether. Let's ban people's ability to use insider information to buy stocks and make sure if they're going to sell any, that they got to tell everybody well in advance so that Americans and the market can know. My bill also has real teeth in it. It's a $2,000 fine or 10% of the proceeds. Let's say you sell $1 million in stock and you didn't tell the market ahead of time like you're supposed to. You didn't follow that 7-day rule. It's a $100,000 penalty, a 10% penalty. So either $2,000 or 10%, whichever bigger, plus you have to give up all your profits. That is a penalty with teeth that will get the attention of members here on Capitol Hill. It is time that we restore the integrity and the confidence in this body when it comes to inside information. We, because of our position, have access to this, but we should not benefit from it. This is supposed to be public service. No one should come here seeking a profit. And yet on Monday night, some of my colleagues tried to pass a unanimous consent, passing the Stop Insider Trading Act that the House of Representatives passed, and Democrats blocked it. Democrats blocked my Stop Insider Trading Act, which would have helped restore confidence in this body. It is time that we got the Democrats on board, that we get this passed. It passed in the House with Democrat support. 13 Democrats and 2 Democrat co-sponsors on the Stop Insider Trading Act in the House that the House was able to pass. They've sent it here to the U.S. Senate for us to do our job. I call on my Democratic colleagues, my colleagues across the aisle, please get on board. We need to restore faith in the institution. A 15% approval rating is terrible. We need to restore the integrity. We need to restore the confidence. My Stop Insider Trading Act does just that. And I encourage all of my colleagues to get on board this common sense proposal to be able to restore integrity and confidence in the U.S. Senate and prevent insider trading from getting between us and the American people. Mr. President, I yield back.
Senator from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to talk about a subject people just love to talk about. Come to the floor to talk about a big scam in our country. It's happening in broad daylight before our very eyes. Politicians here in Washington know what's going on, but they refuse to speak about it. They're too worried about getting reelected in most cases. And they think telling the truth about the scam will hurt their chances in staying in power. Well, here's the sad truth. For decades now, the American people have paid into Social Security each month without having any idea if they will ever see a cent of the money that they put in. Since being signed into law in 1935 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our great president, Americans' money has been going in the front door of the federal government and then going right out the back door. Your dollar doesn't grow, and it doesn't come back to you or your children. It's a big, gigantic, blown-up Ponzi scheme. And the last time I looked, people who do Ponzi schemes usually go to jail. Every American is forced to participate in it. You got no choice. You don't have a say of the matter. Whether you're 17 or 67, more than 6% of your paycheck is taken out by the federal government to pay for Social Security, your so-called retirement. That might not seem like a lot, but to me, an American struggling to live paycheck to paycheck, that 6% is a huge sacrifice. Americans have been paying into this program for years, only to see a fraction of what they have been promised. It really makes you wonder how this government-approved Ponzi scheme is legal. The truth is that this retirement savings, this savings program is 100% broke. It's absolutely broke. Just like our federal government of $40 trillion in debt. The Social Security Fund is projected to run out of its reserve money in 2032, just a few years from now. You know, when these funds are depleted, senior citizens could see a cut in their monthly check up to 22 to 25% of their benefits. On average, that's $500 a month. You know, if the federal government were to try and save the program, it would most likely mean that your taxes would skyrocket. 38% of mandatory spending within the federal budget annually goes toward failing Social Security program. Yes, the money you send up here, 38% a year goes to Social Security, not the money that you already sent, because guess what? It's been sent, it's been spent and scammed out of our system. It's not there. In other words, almost $1.6 trillion every year of your taxpayer dollars is being spent on a program that is currently scheduled to go bankrupt in 6 years. So basically, the money you send up here has been spent and now is nowhere to be found. The Social Security program is the single largest program we're wasting our tax dollars on. Biggest. It's a mind-boggling program, to say the least, but don't worry, it gets worse. After decades of having Social Security taken out, millions of Americans have to pay taxes when they go to collect their Social Security. Yep, you're exactly right. After you pay taxes and you put it in there for savings for many years and you get it back, guess what? You got to pay taxes on that. Because our former president and former senator, Mr. Joe Biden, when he was a senator in 1983, got the great idea of let's tax Social Security. Well, what a scam. Depending on which tax bracket you're in, between 50% to 85% of your benefits can be taxed by the federal government. Last year, I introduced the Senior Citizens Tax Elimination Act to stop the unjust double tax on Social Security benefits. Thankfully, the One Big Beautiful Bill included senior deductions that significantly reduced federal taxes for the majority of retirees. Thank goodness. In a day and age where the cost of living is skyrocketing and our seniors should not experience a second tax on their Social Security when they're already paid tax on that money. If we must keep this outdated program, the least we can do is to ensure that senior citizens don't get slapped with a double tax. Despite what millions of Americans have been tricked into believing, it turns out that paying into Social Security does not entitle you to a fixed pot of money. Everybody thinks we're going to pay in, I'm going to get a lot of money at the end. That sad reality is that many Americans won't see a cent of the money that they paid into Social Security. Basically, Social Security is just, folks, another tax. A tax on both employees and employers, since most companies have to match the 6% that their employees are forced to pay out of their paychecks. Yeah, they double the tax. This is socialism. It's highway robbery. And for the last 60 years, we've known this program was going under, but no one up here has been willing to fix it. In fact, Social Security is known as the third rail of politics that no one up here is allowed to talk about. Don't talk about Social Security because we don't have a solution and we might lose our jobs. In fact, Social Security is known as that third rail because nobody will touch it. It's taboo to talk about Social Security. But my question is why? Why is that? We work for the people. We work for the taxpayers. We've known this program was going bankrupt for years. It's been a disaster since day one. When millions of Americans are going to reach retirement age soon, we better look out. They're expecting to get their money. They're expecting to get the money that they paid into Social Security for years. They're going to get screwed over with nothing left, and this is going to be a serious problem. Social Security scam doesn't stop there. As you know, Joe Biden welcomed tens of millions of illegals into this country with open arms. They said that our borders are closed. Yeah, after they let 20 million people in that shouldn't be here. These aren't nice people either, most of them. Many of them are rapists, murderers, drug lords, and gang members. Well, it turns out the Biden administration and Orlando Mayorkas, our great Homeland Security Director, they weren't just letting these illegals into our country without vetting them. They were handing them Social Security and Medicaid benefits as they were coming into the door. Welcome to the United States of America. We're broke, but we're going to give you money. We're going to give you a Social Security number. It's no wonder we're broke. While millions of Americans will never see the Social Security benefits that they worked hard to pay into throughout their careers, illegals, they're getting money. They're getting rich off the money that Joe Biden said that they could have. It's disgusting, but it's not surprising. This is our federal government. So why aren't we allowed to talk about it? It's almost like the system was set up to fail from the get-go. You know, I caught a lot of flack when I brought this up in a hearing just a few years ago. What's this guy talking about? We're going to get Social Security. Yeah, if you believe that, I got beach land, I'll say you, out in Arizona. Every single American has invested the money that they're forced to pay in Social Security each month into a stock. If they'd have done that, they would have gotten 10 times the money that they'd put in if it would just invested in the stock market. But you know where it was invested in? Most people don't know this. Your money, when it comes here, is put into Treasury bonds that have very low returns. Very, very low. Not even close to anything that you would ever invest in yourself. That's where your money goes. Don't be naive. The reason Social Security is invested in bonds is because it is being used to basically prop up the federal government. We're broke. We don't have any money. Please send more. Can we raise the Social Security tax and just tell them they're going to get more money at the end? Folks, it is a scam. If this money had been invested in the stock market again, you would have had 10 to 15 times more money. It's embarrassing. But apparently, we're not supposed to bring that up. To his credit, President George Bush tried to save Social Security and 2000. He tried to privatize a lot of this money that went in there. If we'd have just done that, if this body in here would have just said, okay, we know we've screwed it up for 40 years, let's go ahead and do it. Let's get out of this jam. They didn't want any part of it because they wanted to steal the rest of the money, and that's exactly what's going on. He suggested that younger workers divert their portion to a money market account that would pay for theirs in the future and ours today, those of us that are close to the Social Security. But of course, the DC swamp up here, they shut that down fast. Let's don't talk about Social Security. It is taboo. It's a dang shame. The program might not be on the verge of bankruptcy today if they had just invested part of the young people's money into the market. But you have to remember, the government relies on your money for their slush fund. The federal government stopped working in your best interest a long, long time ago. The average taxpayer earning the medium wage of paying approximately $3,500 to $4,500 annually into the Social Security program over a 40-year work period, that's around $140,000 to $180,000. That could have gone toward a 401k, and you would have had money to retire on. People would be seeing much greater returns. We'd better start figuring this out, folks. We better start figuring it out. This group up here, a lot of them are going to say, I'm going to be gone. I'm not going to have to worry about it. Somebody's going to pay the price. It won't be long till people be coming right around this building going, where's my money? You remember January 6th? Yep. January the 6th was a pretty bad day. I was here. I sat right over there. My very first day here. I'm thinking, what a disaster I've gotten into. Well, you start telling people you're not getting your Social Security money, it's going to get ugly. And I don't blame them, not one bit. We're $40 trillion in debt. There's no sign of it slowing down. The bottom line is we need to get bureaucrats and politicians out of this mess, stop this Social Security scam, let people really know what's going on, and give the money back to the people. We need to make sure Americans get what they were promised, or we need to come up with an alternative solution that will allow Americans to make their own retirement investments. Give them their money, or let's put it in a money market account. The stock market is booming. It's far past time Washington, D.C. starts working for the people that we're supposed to represent. What a thought.
I recognize the senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, all of us who hold the office of senator know that we really only succeed in our service to the states which we represent because of the tireless dedication of the men and women who make up our teams back home where we're from and here in Washington, D.C. While we may be the face or the voice on television, it's our name on the bills, it's our name on the door, it's really the folks who make up our teams that make it possible for us to make a difference every day for the people we represent. I'm blessed to represent 1 million Delawareans, and I know that I could not do that job at all, let alone well, without the gift and the blessing of the service of roughly 50 people. But today I wanted to take some time out to thank and recognize the heart of my team in Delaware, someone who I have long admired and whose service I greatly appreciate, Marie Cordovano. What does it take to run a political campaign, to run a political party, to run a Senate office? It takes someone like Marie. I've known her so long, I feel like she's been in my office for decades, but it's really only been 5 years. She's been a full-time part of my Senate office, but I've known her since I first ran. She is the heartbeat of the Delaware Democratic Party and in many ways of my office in Wilmington, Delaware. She brings so much to her service, to her job: kindness, hospitality, a charitable and upbeat spirit, a passion for serving others, a lifelong Democrat, someone who is because she believes in helping others. When I've asked folks for what they associate with Marie, one other word came up over and over: mushrooms. Now that might surprise you if you're not from where I'm from, but just on the northern border of Delaware is the center of mushroom horticulture in North America. And because of Marie's family connection to some of the leaders in the mushroom industry, every year she brings a pallet at Thanksgiving of boxes of mushrooms and won't let anyone go without accepting one. Being as I am a little picayune about the ethics committee on which I serve, I initially tried to reject these gifts of mushrooms, to donate them to the food bank or give them to someone else. And yet, like so much of Marie's hospitality and kindness, they just kept coming. They are a welcome and appreciated gift, but a reminder of the example of her kindness and her generosity to others. That's the word that came up most often when I asked others who've served there for now 5 years in my office, what do you think of when you think of Marie? Kind. Someone who gives great, big, warm hugs, who even if she's having a hard day, asks, how's your day? Someone with contagious positivity. Someone who every day has to answer call after call after call from constituents who more often than not are calling to complain. And Marie doesn't just answer the phone, she listens. She doesn't just listen, she engages. She doesn't just engage, she educates. She handles it with incredible skill, making sure that the folks who call my office are heard and their concerns are conveyed, and if possible, that they leave better understanding what it is they called in about. Because let's be blunt, sometimes these calls are motivated by seeing something on cable TV that maybe isn't exactly true. And so in a gentle but positive way, she asks persistent questions and guides my constituents to better insight. When I've asked others in the office, they've said this: I can't imagine a better person to represent you, Chris, to your constituents. Even over the phone, you get a sense of Marie's heart and warmth. And there is no one more dedicated, not just for the fight for democracy, but for the values of Chris Coons and his office. So Marie, thank you. Thank you for sharing your kindness. Thank you for sharing your warmth. Thank you for sharing what you've done for Delaware for so long. You are loved across our DC and Delaware teams and will be dearly missed. And I hope you get to spend more time now, with your children, Ben and Sarah, with your grandchildren, Asher and Carter, with your dog, Nico. You are the best of Delaware, a proud Padua alumna with a passion for service, family, kindness, and democracy. I cannot wait to hear about the adventures ahead, and thank you for your service. I want to take some time today to also speak about someone who's been the heart of my team here in Washington, Jose Estrada. My wife and I have come to view Jose not just as a colleague, an employee, a friend, a member of our extended family. What makes for an incredible public servant? Diligence, determination, insight, hard work, humor, trust, kindness. Jose has all of these and more. When he initially got the job offer, he drove without stopping from San Diego here to DC. Just a first sign of the intensity of his commitment to this work. I have watched him grow from being a right out of college 22-year-old to someone whose advice and counsel on a daily basis are key to me and how I do my job. He is often the first person I see in the morning and the last person I see at night. And he is incredibly humble and would never take credit for all the contributions he's made to my team and my office, which is why I thought it was important to get it on the record so that in the future he could not deny that he was well-regarded, well-respected, and made a significant impact. It's hard to capture everything Jose does for our team. He's someone who always has the answers to pressing questions, whether from me, from the scheduling team, or from interns. He remembers who I was in a meeting with 3 years ago. He remembers the details of all sorts of memos. He remembers the details of my life, what church I grew up in, what neighborhood I grew up in. He has now mentored more than 70 interns in my office. And I'm very proud of our intern program because it's where I hire from. I began here as an intern for Senator Bill Roth and for Senator Joe Biden. And knowing that Jose has taken intense care of every intern, their interview and selection, their placement, and making sure they have the chance to genuinely contribute means a lot to Annie and me. From one of our former interns, they said in a role where Jose had to be everywhere and do everything, he still spent the time to get to know each of us and make sure our internship was special. And he's been so good at it that they then come and work for us full-time in our office. From one of his colleagues in my office here in Washington, in any crisis, you know you can call Jose and he'll just take care of it. Not only will he take care of it, but you know you have a friend through all of it. Jose, you've served with selflessness, kindness, dedication, even joy. You're someone who's willing to put in the hard work, to work 14, 16, 18 hours a day. When we're here all night for Votorama, he's the one who's with me at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. He takes the time to get up early, get that extra cup of coffee, get in to talk to the interns early, get them donuts, be generous with his time and advice, and make our office a great place to be. The most important accolade, of course, comes not from me, but from my wife, Annie, who literally said Jose is one of the most thoughtful and kind people we know. I know he will be an inspiration to his 11-month-old niece, Valentina. I know that his parents, Jose and Maricela, who are so proud of him, they need to know that you raised a remarkable young man. I know they will be thrilled to have him back in California as he returns to attend Stanford Law School this fall. I believe there is nothing this promising young man cannot do. He has demonstrated remarkable wisdom and talent, insight into politics, and I am confident his future is bright, and we will someday see him back here. The next chapter of his life includes becoming a lawyer and using the skills and the talent of a lawyer to change lives, to help those whom the law does not protect, and to advocate for justice at a time when that is really at risk in our nation. Jose, the office will simply not be the same without you, but you leave us better. We all will carry a piece of your heart, your humor, your kindness, and your insight. And you won't be free of us either, because you are a friend and a member of our family for life. You are the best of what DC should be, someone here truly to do good and to make a difference. And I hope you know that you have. With that, thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.